Now watch this drive.
Welcome back to the Highly Original Podcast. I'm Joe Martino.
And I'm Parker Danks.
And we are back with a special episode because we have a special guest. Rocket Thrall is here to join us in our discussion today. How you doing, Rocket?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on your podcast, and good to finally meet you, Joseph. And yeah, I'm excited to get into this movie because I love this movie. So
yes,
Parker told me that Parker invited me and he said, give a suggestion of a movie, and this was my first suggestion was Midsummer, but y'all already did it, so here we are.
So the movie Rocket's talking about is Quentin Tarantino's film Inglorious Basterds. But before we get into that, Rocket, I just wanted to let you introduce yourself a little bit to the listeners. But first off, I want to just plug to all of our listeners, any new listeners, to like and subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, as well as follow us at _highly_original_podcast on Instagram, and kind of keep up with us and see our posts, my memes that I work hard on, and little clips that we do. So with that, Rocket, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Great. So my name is Rocket Thrall. I live in Austin, right near Parker. I've known Parker since we were like 14 or so, right? Like sophomore year of high school, something like that.
Yeah.
What I do, I'm a musician. That's pretty much what I mean. You can see some of these instruments. I have a bunch more on this other wall, but I'm a bass player. I play in 2 local bands in Austin. I don't know if I can plug them, just say their names.
No, yeah, please do.
One of them is called Powerhawk. You can find us on Spotify. Just search We Are Powerhawk is our album. And then another band is called Iron Uncle. And you can find us on YouTube under a channel called Hurts to Hear Records, as in like hurt, like sound, hurt, HERTZ. So you can come check out our stuff. It's like, pretty fun. Neither band takes themselves too seriously. We have fun shows. We're like a bit of hard
what kind of genre?
Yeah, we're mostly like hard rock mixed with like Iron Uncle's a little more of like a bluesy garage rock, I'd say, and then Powerhawk, we're kind of like, I don't know, like Van Halen or something. We're a little more party oriented. We have like our guitar players like insane. So there's a lot of shredding in Powerhawk, like aptly named band, I would say.
I can testify. I've seen them live, and they put on a really good show.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll have to check you guys out. But I was thinking, Rocket, like, I guess you kind of didn't have much of a choice, though, being in a rock band with your name. I feel like you're kind of like, it was like you were born to be a rock star with the name Rocket.
Yeah, I guess so. I also did theater just like Parker did. So at some point I was gonna end up performing no matter what that was. So yeah.
No, I mean that's an interesting name. Like, is there a story behind that?
Kind of. So it's kind of a combination of different things, like, but it really too long didn't read comes down to I'm named after Rocket J. Squirrel from the cartoon Rocky and Bullwinkle, which was like around in like the 60s. I don't know.
I've never seen it, but I'm familiar with the like I know the
he's like a flying squirrel, and he's got his best friend Bullwinkle, who's like a moose, and I'm pretty much named because my name is Rocket. My middle initial is A, Thrall, which is pretty darn close to Rocket J. Squirrel. So that's basically what I'm named after.
I remember when I heard that your name was Rocket, I asked, I was like, is that like a nickname or his real name? He was like, real name. I was like, wow.
Real name,
yeah. A rock star. But today we're not discussing rock and roll. As I mentioned in the beginning, we are doing we're going to be talking about the Quentin Tarantino film from 2019, Inglorious Basterds, which is I would say a alternative history black comedy.
Hey Joe, real quick. It's 2009, by the way.
What am I? 2019. Do I keep saying that?
No, it's okay. It's
Oh man. All right.
get them
That's
switched
what I
up.
meant. All right. But anyways, a 2009 film. Uh, so yeah, it's sort of like an alternative history black comedy set in World War II. It is
Mhm.
about this elite squad. Well, it's got a few stories, kind of two main stories that collide. But one of them is this elite squad of American soldiers, many of whom are Jewish American, are sent behind enemy lines in France during the Nazi occupation to kind of do covert missions, and they're known for their brutality. Of course, as it is a Tarantino film, and there's the antagonist embodied in Christoph Waltz's Colonel Hans Landa, who's an SS, part of the Death Head division, which is historically that they enforced the Nazi racial policies and all the atrocities. So he's known as the Jew hunter, and he's tracking down all the Jews that have remained in France. And the main part of the film is the mission of the Inglorious Basterds, the squad that are led by I believe Lieutenant Aldo, who's played by Brad Pitt,
Rain.
to assassinate all the big Nazi leaders, Hermann Goering, Joseph Goebbels, and Adolf Hitler himself at this propaganda movie premiere. And this is kind of where it is very alternative history, because they assassinate all of them, and that obviously is not what happened in history. Um, but that's the basic synopsis of this film. Now, unlike you two, I'm not like the biggest fan of this film.
Mhm.
I wanted to kind of start off with my positioning here.
Sure.
I I like Tarantino. I think I like the characters in this film. I think this film demonstrates his mastery of dialogue and scenes. I think Colonel Hans Landa is a brilliant villain. The way that he is sort of this just kind of apolitical sociopath who's he's with the Nazis because they'll allow him to do what he wants to do. And we see that he easily switches sides, and throughout the movie we see he doesn't have any real personal ideology motivating him to be in the SS, other than
Right.
it's a fun challenge for him. Uh, so with all that said, my big thing with this film is why was it made, what is it for, why do we need a alternative history film that strays so far from real history. So that's always been my issue with this movie, is just I think it's weird. I think it's a weird movie. I don't really understand why they made it the way they did. I think maybe instead of cartoonishly killing Hitler at the end, maybe it's a fictional Nazi general or something. That would have been my suggestion. But yeah, for me, it's
Well,
always been like the twisting of the history has always bothered me about the film. Now I know you guys have a different perspective.
yeah, well, first thing I would say is that the movie itself, I think, is less I would say like the thesis of the movie, or not necessarily the thesis, but the movie is less about being an alternate history portrayal of World War II, or even World War II in general. I really think that it's a movie about film set against this backdrop of basically using such an easy, like World War II is like the last war in American history that we have this black and white morality about. And I think watching this movie this time for preparing for this, I realized that it's really not that out of the ordinary. It seems out of the ordinary today to go so cartoonishly, they kill all the top Nazis at the end. But this movie really drives home the point that World War II was like the first war where Hollywood was a thing. Like all the characters know about different pop culture references and movies and stuff that existed in that time. And as like in the real world, like we were making movies, we had, Captain America was punching Hitler in the face, you know what I'm saying? Like we were making movies during the 40s that were basically these big jingoistic, like let's go kill the Nazis, like there's no such thing as a German, they're all Nazis, you know what I mean? Like all the morality and politics is swept aside. And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but with the film that they watch towards the end of that movie, I think is a great kind of mirroring of kind of what he's talking about with
And
that.
I understand you. I understand what you're saying, but I don't think it needed to be like a Family Guy vignette sketch. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't need to be that cartoonish. Like, I really like you could have done all that without like just make up a fictional Nazi general that they kill at the end. You know what I mean? When Parker, I'm sure going away.
Yeah, so I want to start by I was listening to an interview with Quentin Tarantino today, actually, to get prepared for the podcast, and he was saying the lines of, I like to rewrite history the way I wanted it to be rewritten. And he's also said in a different interview, when I make movies, a lot of directors don't like to watch their own content. Same with actors. Tarantino's not like that. He's like, no, I make them for me. They're for my entertainment. I'll sit in my bed and watch them all day long, and everybody else is just invited. So when we see Inglorious Basterds or Kill Bill or these movies that are a little bit over the top with the violence, and sometimes, well, in this case, the history is completely rewritten. This is just for entertainment purposes. This is just for everyone to have fun. Obviously, the Nazis are terrible people, and it's for us to go like, hey, for like an hour and a half, or how long's the movie? 2.5 hours. We get to be in a different fictional world where the Nazis do die, and Hitler does have it coming. And
but they did die. Like, that's the thing. It's
but
not like they
but
didn't
not in the
die.
movie theater by Shoshana.
Yeah, but I mean, they all met pretty pathetic or bad ends. It's not like they all escaped and went to Cancun. Like, they all ended up killing themselves as they were surrounded by their enemies. Like, it's not
either that or they were
so
hung.
I don't understand the purpose of the movie.
But I think he also wanted to make, the bastards kind of like the vigilantes that he wanted to make for the audience. That way we could root for some bad guy. Well, they were good, but I think Rocket, you brought up a point yesterday that even though like they're the good guys, they're also doing like most of the killing. You really never see, besides the beginning of the movie, the Nazis killing any of the Jewish people. It's mostly the bastards killing all the Nazis. So even though they're the good guys, you're kind of at the end, it almost has you making you feel bad for them just a little bit, but then you remember how they're Nazis. So
I would, off of that, I would say it kind of does jump back into the like, using Nazis as a villain is normally kind of like a really lazy thing, because it's like like I said, there's such a moral black and white. Like the second you make a villain a Nazi, it's like you almost can stop writing his character right there. And I think I lost my train of thought, Parker, with what you were saying. But I think going off to something else, going off of that, I would say that's part of the reason why Hans Land is such an interesting character. But that's the power of movies, is to take something and make something that never would have happened in the real world. And I think his use of the Nazis, like one fair criticism I could say about this film you brought up, Joseph, is that they don't really show a lot of the atrocities, that the Nazis were responsible for. But now I came back to my point. That's why I think, just using the Nazis alone, you don't really have to say anything else, because they're universally evil, and ideologically evil. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. I mean, but kind of like going in. I mean, one thing I just want to say, like, yeah, I mean, I don't think it was lazy. Like, I understand. I think you can make a World War II.
No, yeah.
I don't think that's necessarily lazy.
Oh no, totally not. I guess more what I meant.
I think it is lazy when they set it in modern times now, and it's like Nazis.
Sure.
But like, if you're gonna go back to the past, of course you could use it. But like, yeah,
Oh,
in
totally.
like if you're setting it in 2020, I mean, you might want to be like, all right, let's instead of having like
Yeah.
a secret Nazi underground camp that survived 80 years, why don't we do a new bad guy? But I wanted to ask you guys. I mean, I already kind of went into mine definitely with Colonel Hans Landa. I think he's a brilliantly written character and a very menacing villain. I kind of want to ask you guys, which character stood out to you guys? Rocket, since you're our guest, I'll let you take point.
Sorry, just ate some crushed ice. Um, so I would say I was thinking about this for a while, and I think my favorite character is Lieutenant Aldo Rain, the Brad Pitt character, because he's the leader of the he's we can imagine is the guy who's put this team together of the bastards, and by the way that he briefs them at the beginning, and I think that his character is on one level funny because of his like just ludicrously overstated like southern accent and
He's from
his
Tennessee,
mannerism.
right?
Yeah, Maynardville, Tennessee is what he says. Yeah, but I think that he actually serves as like uh, this is gonna sound funny at first, but he's the moral center point of this film, and because the morality in this film, in my opinion, begins and ends with Nazis are evil. So, f them basically, and like what he is so brutal and ruthless that he will basically what they're doing for the most of the movie is committing war crimes basically upon Nazis. So who cares, right? But particularly at the end he does something that is like clearly a violation of like the acts of war, and I think that the movie itself is not meant to be a moral play, but I think that he's just representative of basically the moral playground of the movie, which is, like I said again, it's like Nazis bad, everything else like is justified, and that's how his character comes off. Which it seems very most of the characters in this movie are very one dimensional, but he I think particularly because he's the American badass, but he's just as brutal, in what he does. Kind of where I was coming from,
Yeah,
basically, with Aldo Rain.
yeah.
I have to go with in terms of like a character arc. I really like Shoshana Dreyfus, and her code name when she changes her identity when she gets away is Emmanuel Mimure. And so, to anyone who hasn't seen the movie, the audience members, Shoshana came from a Jewish family that was hiding in a bunker in a rural village in France by this guy, and Lieutenant Londa comes down and pretty much shoots her entire family up. But Shoshana gets away. Everyone dies except her, and she runs off. And Londa goes, "So long, Shoshana." So this entire time, you get to see like her get away. And in the next 4 years, when she's in France, like I said, she changes her entire identity and she owns a movie theater. After she's been harassed by the Nazis, she plans to plot a scheme to blow up the entire movie theater with all the Nazis, including Hitler, in them. So, what I like about her is you really, first off, you are just so sympathetic to her situation. You have no idea what's going to go on. You have no idea if they're going to catch her. She's even invited to a Nazi dinner because there is a Nazi movie star slash soldier who's interested in her and won't leave her alone. And this whole time, you're thinking that she's going to get busted when really she's scheming to plot to kill all the entire Nazis. And it goes back to Tarantino's idea of revenge. Tarantino loves making movies about revenge. He's done it with Kill Bill, and he kind of did it with Shoshana's story in Inglorious Basterds. I like with this story in particular, you got like the Bastards story going on, and then you have Shoshana's story. And I really liked seeing what was going on with her. And you're kind of rooting for her the whole time because at the beginning of the film, she's so incredibly vulnerable. I mean, she is bloody. You could tell she's sweat, she's famished, and she's running. And then you get to see her kick some ass. And I just think she was a great character. Her acting was impeccable. She had great facial expressions. That scene between Lieutenant Londa and her at the dinner, and by the way, Tarantino loves to make you want food and drinks, where they're eating a strudel. You are really thinking that Lieutenant Londa is going to know who she is, and I think he knows she's a Jew, but I wouldn't say he knows if she's Shoshana, the girl that he tried to capture 4 years prior. So that's my thing. Is I really like Shoshana's character. I like that she got a revenge. Her tragic end was unfortunate, but it was actually kind of romantic in a sick Tarantino way. But yeah, that's my take. That's my favorite character.
I mean, I wouldn't actually be surprised if he did know it was her though.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
we're
Because that's
talking
like
about
part of
that.
his character is like he's like it's a game to him.
But
Like,
but I was saying
Right.
this was saying last night. He never sees her face though. But he is good about hunting Jewish people. So it could be
oh
that
yeah,
in the
all right.
mix.
Maybe
He
now
could
you're right.
know
You're right.
he
You're
could
right.
know that she's onto something, but I don't think he necessarily knows it's Shoshana.
Okay, yeah, no,
See,
you're right. You're right.
I had the same exact thought, Joseph, last night until basically you just relived what happened to me last night. He was like, he hadn't seen her face though. And so, but I think in that scene, he definitely knows something about her story isn't lining up because there's a particular moment she talks about her aunt and uncle is where she got the theater from. She inherited from her, and that her uncle died in the Blitzkrieg, which would have occurred prior to 1941, prior to when she
1940.
well, the movie begins in 1941.
Yeah, but
I should
the invasion of France is 1940. So that's when her uncle
40. No,
presumably.
correct. No, correct. Yeah. So I think that and he also mentions that he knows all the Germans in the town that are worth knowing, or he says something to that effect. So I think it's
That's
clear.
the Gestapo guy.
Right.
The
That's
other
right.
scene.
That's a later scene.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I think that you can tell Hans knows something about her stories not lining up. But yeah, he probably doesn't know that's who she is.
No, yeah. I mean, speaking of scenes, because as we are kind of discussing here, and the scenes of the film, like, what is everybody's like favorite scene? Like, what's the scene that you guys stands out to you?
Um, well, I'll go with basically encompassing the whole end of the movie, like including the massacre part, basically the theater from when while the Nazis are all watching the movie and they're all laughing through to the end of the massacre when everything burns down. That is my favorite part of the movie because there's a lot going on thematically. Like, on first watch, you could just be like, woo, they're killing all the Nazis. But when you watch it, you're like, man, this is just brutal. Like it's funny because if these were not Nazis, sitting in this theater with this massacre occurring, that would be like just a horrific scene to watch. And it is already pretty horrific, the way that they're just like, mowing down these people. So I thought that did an interesting juxtaposition with how the Nazis are watching this propaganda film and he's killing tons and tons of US soldiers and they're just like, ah, ha, 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 ha. Little do we know that about 5 minutes later, a lot of people in the audience of this movie are going to be doing the same thing. You just flip the script. So I thought that was really, that scene always stuck with me because it is like objectively horrific, but within the context of the movie, I mean, morality, the movie doesn't care about it. You know what I mean?
So Parker, what was your favorite scene?
I have to go with the pup shootout, the basement shootout that's
That's a
towards
good
the end of
one.
the film.
That's a good one.
That is ultimately my favorite scene. I have watched that scene so many times and I always catch something every time I do. And the reason why I like it so much is because everything that could have gone wrong went wrong in that scene. And even Brad Pitt's character called it. He said, "You're fighting in a basement." And they're like, "Yeah, this is going to work though." And he's like,
with
"No,
it's got one entrance, right?
yeah, you're
Yeah,
fighting
right.
in a basement. This is not good." And I also want to give a huge shout out to Michael Fassbender, who played
The British guy.
Yeah, he played the British,
the British
spy
guy.
officer who was disguising himself as a German officer, but that actor is actually Irish. So that's Oscar worthy right there. I don't know, just to see like the entire thing play out, seeing if it was going to go right, and everything went wrong. How Bridget von Hammersmark opening the beginning, trying to talk to all the Nazis, party with them, play with them, and then the guys walk in, the officers, and she goes, "Oh, those are my friends." Goes and talks to them, and everything goes south. And Hellstrom, I think, was one of the main officers who caught on like the second they got in there, but he's in disguise
like
like that.
Was he was Gestapo, like the secret police, or was he just like a regular officer?
He was one of the officers that escorted Shoshana to the Nazi dinner. And he was like, "Get in the car." And you think
he was a secret police.
Yeah. And the second, he shows up, everything's going to go even farther south. When he orders the drinks, he does this instead of the German 3. It was all very, very genius work in terms of signs and
like with that scene, Parker. Like I liked it because I felt like it was one of the most like realistic scenes. Like it really did seem like something that would actually like happen in the spy world at that time. Like because he identifies him, Michael Fassbender's character, by he's speaking, not with an accent, and he's like, and the two other guys that are from the Inglorious Basterds, they're from Austria and Germany. One of them is a defector, I think Stiglo or something, Stiglitz. Yeah, he's like a Nazi defector, and they both have like accents, and he identifies that like the British guy, like you don't have a German accent. And that's how it all like they made. Don't they say he's like, oh, he's from some village with like they like make up this story. Notice Mike Myers is in the movie.
Hell yeah. He's so great.
Yeah, Austin Powers is in this movie. For like 5 minutes.
He's the most stereotypical British guy. Like he's like, all right, now let's get at it. Like in the way he says stuff. Yeah, the way he talks
I do like the juxtaposition between like the Americans breathing and then like the British breathing, because it is like so, like,
right.
Yeah,
like in the beginning, and he's like, care for a drink, and Fassbender's like, if you offer me a scotch and plain water, I'll have a scotch and plain water. And then he's like, well, make it for yourself like a good boy, like whatever. Like a good chap.
Yeah, and I'm like, I mean, that was a great scene. I'd say, honestly, now I'm thinking about it, I think the pub scene might be my favorite scene. But I'll just say a different scene for the sake of the episode here. I think the opening scene when we first meet Colonel Hans Landa is really good because it introduces Hans Landa, and he's so chipper and very proper, and he's interrogating this French dairy farmer, and he's just he's like, since it's your house, can we speak English? Would you mind that? He's all very, very proper, but it's also very like menacing and intimidating because he's so, proper and he's like asks for a glass of milk for his like drink. And yeah, that whole scene. And something I know, did you notice in the movie where he grabs the dairy farmer's daughters by the wrist, and he's like hanging on to their wrists for a little bit? You guys notice that?
I remember him taking one and kissing her hand, but I don't remember him holding.
There's a few times where he's grabbing them by the wrist and holding on, and that's because he's checking their pulse to see if they're afraid.
Right.
That's like part of what he's doing. And
there's so much detail.
It's a really good detail. And he's just like, and it's like where we just see that he's like, it's like fun. He's like, he's playing a game. Like it's not, he doesn't come in there and start saying all these anti-Semitic things. I mean, he says it a little bit, but not like as a normal Nazi would. You know,
Right.
he's more of just like, this is my job, like, you know, and I'm very good
Yeah.
at it. Like,
Yeah, he comes in like kind of like knowing he doesn't need to like be scary to like control the room, and that kind of says it all, you know. Um like um I really do enjoy that scene as well because it's very much it sets the tone for the movie that this is going to kind of be a fantasy with the way that there's that you know, almost spaghetti western-esque music at the beginning, and there's like the farm, and then they see the car drive up with the, you know, the Nazis in it. And one of my favorite movies of all time is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and it's basic. I don't know if have either of y'all seen that.
I haven't seen it, but like
it
Yes,
I
it's
know what it is, and I
it's
know
a,
what it is.
it's a
beginning of the
classic
movie.
film.
The beginning of the movie is almost exactly the same. There's this like dark dressed man rides up on a horse to a farm and then comes into the man's house and they eat, and you can tell that he's like kind of trying to get information from him about some gold, and it goes south. He kills everybody. But the way that scene, it's almost mirroring, like even at the beginning, almost shot for shot. So that to me kind of sets the tone for the movie, where it's like this is he's gonna really like mine his film knowledge, and he's gonna present this from the jump as maybe not the period piece, you know, serious period piece that it looks like on the surface.
Well, yeah, I
uh,
mean, Tarantino definitely is like a fan of westerns and like
mhm,
old Japanese, like the golden age of Japanese cinema.
totally.
And like he talks about this openly. Like I think he's even said that Pulp Fiction is like a western, just set in at that point
In
modern
LA.
day Los Angeles. Like, you know,
That's a weird assessment, but I'll give it
no,
to him. He
well, this
made the
is stuff
movie.
that he has like said. I'm not
Yeah,
like,
yeah. He's gave the movie. He made the movie, so you know I'll have to agree.
you know, so like yeah, it's definitely is a theme that I think is very present in a lot of his films, and he
Mhm,
references films like that frequently. Like what
totally.
you're saying, like you know, but yeah, I mean, I yeah, so I'd say like those are like yeah, this movie is filled with like great scenes like that. Um,
Mhm.
but I guess like kind of like where would you say to wrap up this conversation? Where would you put this film in Tarantino's collection of all his films?
Um, I would say that this is kind of marks a shift in his career. Um, it's it's he's always made these like, you know, pulpy, you know, not to use the pun, but the movie is named Pulp Fiction, but he does these pulpy stories. He elevates these grindhouse like type of silly, cartoonishly violent movies to this level of art where there's like, you know, the period piece of Inglorious Basterds is just the outfits and everything is phenomenal, but the story itself is not serious. I think this kind of shifted his career into these, you know, big, large, epic movies where they're, you know, just encompass a lot. They just seem much bigger now and just even obviously higher budget than his previous works, which almost feel like still more like independent movies, something more like Robert Rodriguez would still makes. And I think so. I think it's a really important one. It's one of my personal favorites, and I think that it was influential on the 2010s because there were a lot more alternate history movies being made. There were also a lot more movies that were even more explicitly about the, you know, Hollywood's love with itself. Like you get movies like La La Land and such, and I think that this movie was influential in a lot of ways. So I think it's one of his most important movies.
Hmm. Parker, what about you?
I agree with what Rocket said. I think Inglorious Bastards is like an allegory for the Hollywood scene as well. I in terms of rankings, I think it's like my second favorite Tarantino film, first being Kill Bill, third being Pulp Fiction.
Which volume of Kill Bill?
Gosh, you see, I always consider them like two movies, but I'd say volume one. I'd say volume one if I had to.
Okay.
But the ending of volume two is one of the best scenes, acted scenes, I think, in cinema history. Yeah, I think this really did change the game, like what Rocket said. And after this, it kind of changed his this filming style and his storytelling style. I mean, he kind of did the same thing with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the same way he did with Inglorious Basterds, kind of rewriting to the ending to history. If you guys watch
Django Unchained as well, even though that is I think, well, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but Django Unchained might fill more of your need, Joseph, for like a completely original story, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I enjoy that film a lot more because of it, because we're going back in time and doing some revenge story, but it's a fictional slave owner to represent all of them, like
sure.
Instead of like that. It's Jamie Foxx doesn't kill every slave owner and every Confederate general like in that movie.
Like, he doesn't kill Robert E. Lee or something.
Yeah, like it's not like crazy,
Sure.
But
sorry, Parker, I didn't mean to cut you off there. If you had
no, that's pretty much wrapped. It's like my second favorite Tarantino film, and I think it's one of the best films of that decade for sure.
So I really like Tarantino. I like Reservoir Dogs, Jackie Brown, and Pulp Fiction. I'd say those are my top three, not necessarily in that order. And yeah, I still think Inglorious Basterds is kind of weird, and yeah. Yeah. So kind of going on the theme of different time periods. I wanted to ask you guys, like, what time period would you want to live in and why? And you know what? I'll even let you guys do this. You can go and be in another country. So if you want to be like in like ancient China, you can do that.
That's hard to say, to be honest. I rarely like am one of those people that think, what time period would be cool to be in, but I don't know, like the 1980s in Los Angeles was freaking awesome. I mean, I'm the rocker guy, so like that whole heavy metal scene, Sunset Strip stuff, like Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, all that stuff, I would have loved to even just be a fly on the wall or be like a fan who was like hanging out in that time period. Yeah, that doesn't really connect much to our themes, but that would hella be probably where I'd want to go.
Okay, 80s Los Angeles. So specifically 1980s Los Angeles.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Parker, what about you?
Man, Rocket kind of took mine a little bit, so I'll take another one because the 80s.
You guys want to be in the 80s?
I just love a lot of 80s music.
I don't understand the whole obsession.
But I'll also say the 60s because that's when the Beatles came about and Rolling Stones, and we got to see you would get to see how music was revolutionized and bands like Pink Floyd formed, and I would love to see that beginning era of the music that we still live and breathe today, and we use our influence from. I think, and there were so many movements in the 60s that changed, and
yeah, but
there was the protest.
You might get drafted.
And, like, I don't know. It was a badass time.
Yeah, I was gonna say
it was brutal, but it was a good time for like history, I think. And
there's a lot of strife. Yeah. So
I would have to say, actually, maybe more than the 80s. Actually, I would say the 60s.
Parker, are you willing to be drafted and go to Vietnam?
I'm one of those people. If I got drafted, I would just do it. I'd be like, all right, well,
you're volunteering to go to Vietnam. Parker's so countercultural. He's gonna volunteer to go.
I don't want to go that far, but if I got drafted, who knows? I think I'd go and just get it over with and make a friend and smoke all the cigarettes in the world.
Okay. Talk about a war that was.
That's what Vietnam was like.
Oh, talk about like culturally like
cigarettes.
Opposite.
No, but all right. No, Parker, I hear what you're saying with like, yeah, you get to see a lot of history. So I'm not going to come at you that much, But Rocket, the 80s, I feel like the 80s are weird.
Okay.
I don't get the whole 80s obsession.
Now, see, I'm particularly fond of just a very specific time and place in, like, like West Hollywood, like the
All right.
Sunset Strip vibe. But I will say, I think I have a little bit of a theory on why the 80s are so fondly looked at is because one, it's really close to, minus like the computers we have today and cell phones and the internet. It's very much comparable. Your lifestyle would be very much comparable to how it is today. But also because it was a time of relative stability
Yeah.
before like the stuff that was going on politically and with corporations and not to get political, but Reaganomics.
But you're going to. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, but basically, but like the after effects of what was starting, like we would start feeling that, and we hadn't felt the after effects economically yet. But the 80s were kind of like this, like everybody seemed to think like, oh, we can do no wrong. Another black and white moral time because we were in the middle of the Cold War,
Yeah,
and
for
everything
me,
was
like
very
I get irritated. I think the 80s is very kitschy, and I think
sure.
I think movies went declined in the 80s.
What
So
about the
that's
teen
why.
movies?
What's that?
The teen movies, like all the John Huston movies, Ferris Bueller, Breakfast Club, 16
Breakfast
Candles,
Club.
Yeah, but it's like,
Terminator, Aliens.
well, Alien is 70s. It's 79. So,
Aliens, though, is 86.
all right. Well, the real one is from
Fair, fair. The first one is the best one.
no, but that's why I like the 70s, man. All right. I would have wanted to be in the 70s because, you know, I love the fashion of the 70s. I think they
I
had
can see
more.
that on you, Joe.
No, I mean, that's almost kind of how I dress now. You know, I would have loved disco. So, like, I don't know. I might be going to like New York in the 70s or something. Maybe I could stay in Philadelphia because disco was hot here too. But you also have great cinema. That's the era of those new directors, like that era of how, like, Coppola,
Yeah,
Lucas, Spielberg, Scorsese, all these
Scorsese.
guys were like making the greatest films ever
That's
before the
very true.
80s ruined it.
Yeah, because the era of the blockbuster did ruin the like creativeness of the previous like decade for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. And also I think you got a lot of good rock music too. You got like, the
Oh, of
version
course.
like funk, you got like all that like Fleetwood Mac type stuff, you
Yes.
know.
And
Yeah.
yeah, disco.
See,
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
mean, you got and the early parts of hip hop. You got the Sugar Hill Gang,
Yeah. Well,
Rapper's
you're right.
Delight, the
The
Well, look at
70s.
greatest
us.
song ever written.
Look at us. We got the
Which
60s,
song?
70s,
Wait,
and
which song?
80s.
Rapper's Delight.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell
No, I'm just kidding, but
yeah.
I mean, yeah. So I like the 70s. So 70s America, and also I don't have to get drafted to Vietnam. So there you go. But I'm probably
Right.
still alive to see all the cultural movements that Parker saw. There you go.
True.
It would be
Not
worth
too
dying in
bad.
Vietnam to see what I saw, Joe.
Yeah, if you turn
Parker's,
18 and
Parker's like
oh, sorry.
he's being absorbed into a character now.
I've
But
always imagined the 70s as like the transition between when like I always see the 70s as like you ever see like an old house that like somebody has like an estate sale or something and the house
yeah,
is like smoked in by somebody who lived there forever and everything has this tiny like layer of tan everywhere. That's how
yeah.
that's kind of how I've always imagined the 70s, but
Yeah, I
you
mean,
make it sound way
it
cooler.
was definitely like a more like less idealistic time. You
Sure,
know,
yeah.
it was that period between the two idealistic decades.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there was a lot of pessimism and stuff, but
Sure.
I liked
But
it.
you made a
Or
great
I
point
would
with the
have
movie.
liked it.
Yeah.
go see the movie American Hustle, and you'll definitely want to be there for the fashion. But something you said, Rocket, before I really did want to just say this real quick before we wrap up our episode. You were talking about like the 70s films being knocked out by the 80s films, the blockbuster films. So there's some people that say Tarantino references that in Pulp Fiction because John Travolta was the leading man of the 70s, you
Oh,
know,
sure.
more like, dancing, singing guy, you know.
Hmm.
And then in the movie, Bruce Willis, who became a blockbuster star in the 80s, kills him.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
And they're both kind of playing, John Travolta's character in that he's very thoughtful about how he looks, he's got his hair
Yeah,
styled, he's got an earring and everything.
he's a
And
groovy dude.
Bruce Willis is like a rugged,
Yeah,
boxer in it. So
that's
like they kind
interesting.
of are playing on that. I don't know if Tarantino's ever confirmed that was what he was referencing, but I think it's cool nonetheless.
That
Intentional
is
or
really
not,
cool.
it's cool.
That is really cool. I never really thought about it that way, but now that you've mentioned it, like that makes a lot of sense. That's really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, guys. So with that, Rocket, I really do want to thank you, man, for coming on.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Again, real quick, plug your bands again real quick for us.
Oh, sure. Powerhawk is one of them. We're like a party rock band, kind of like Van Halen meets a little bit of Motorhead or something. You can find us on Spotify. And the other one is called Iron Uncle. Find us on Hurts to Hear, Hertz, Hurts to Hear Records on YouTube. If you want a little more grungy, kind of like Texas bluesy rock kind of vibe. But yeah, I play bass in both. I'm always gigging around Austin. So if you go to a rock show and you see me, say hello.
All right, all right. I had to get to
Yeah,
Austin.
go see them. They kick
Yeah, you
ass.
should come hang out.
I gotta get down to Austin. But with that, guys, Parker and I will be joining you guys again in 2 weeks, of course, when we release our next episode. And we're going to be joined by a friend of mine, Rachel Dacey, who I met in high school. And she's going to be joining us for our discussion of Twilight, the classic vampire melodrama. So, with that, guys, take care, and we'll see you next time.
Bye,
All
guys.
righty. Thanks, y'all.